we will talk Detroit Lions football and a lot of NFL free agency today. Not too much on the college front. Um, Now, with that being said, we will just hop right into the Detroit Lions free agency here because there have been some, new movements. The newest one, which there's been a few since we last saw you guys on Wednesday, because if you're not new here, we are live every Wednesday, as you know, at 6 p.m. And if you are new here, we are live every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Um, so with that said, Greg Dortch is a wide receiver that we just signed. The specific contract numbers are not out yet, but it's a 1 year deal. He is the Khalif Raymond replacement, in my opinion. I think it's pretty obvious. Also, there's something you'll notice about pretty much every single player that we've signed this free agency, other than two. They're all 27 or younger. And the two that aren't, one is 28 and then one is 32, but he's a tight end, so I don't think that counts. But with that being said, I really like the Dort signing. He's a guy we've talked about a few times on this show. Obviously has the speed and return capabilities that Khalif Raymond possessed. Very similar wide receiver as well. So I do like that, and I assume he's probably going to be cheaper than Raymond, just because I do feel like Raymond. And I love you, Khalif, but you got a little bit overpaid, over $5 million for. He's a really good returner. Don't get me wrong, but for a team like the Bears, who already have a lot of receivers, and don't have a lot of money, that's a little bit of an overpay in my opinion. But with that being said, obviously Dortch goes back to, Drew Petzing, where he, was with, or who he was with in Arizona the last few years. So really, really like this signing right off the bat. And then the other recent one is DJ Wanham, who's another guy we've talked about on the show many times. And he's one that I, really like. I don't necessarily want to go into the season with DJ Wanham as our number two edge penciled in the depth chart, not really on a rotation. I need a rotation with this guy, okay? And there's a few, different reasons why, but a lot of it just comes or it comes down to his pass rush ability, in my opinion. Now, is he a terrible pass rusher? No, but he is not great, if I'm being honest with you. He doesn't have a lot of juice off the edge, not a lot of bend. He's, pretty stiff. Watching a lot of his film today, just, I kept seeing a lot of the same moves, not a lot going on, just a little bit of like a power rush, he kind of strong arms, give him that long arm. And it's really nothing special on that front. So don't get too excited about how many sacks he's gonna have, because I would say max like 6 or 7. So it's one of those things that I am excited about, but I also know the limits of this player. He's a really good run defender. Think about it this way: he's replacing Marcus Davenport, and he's better. He's not as good not as good of a pass rusher as Muhammad, but he's a much better run defender. And so he's kind of a upgrade over both of those guys in certain ways. So I really like both of those signings, and he got up to $6 million. We'll have to see the exact details on that, but solid deals, I think, so far from those two.
Yeah, I like a lot of what Brett Holmes is doing this offseason, despite what One Pride Twitter will say. And we are getting guys that, in my opinion, fill very specific roles. As you mentioned, Dortch would be basically, I don't want to say a clone, but in terms of role on this team, a copy paste carbon copy of Raymond. He'll be a wide receiver four. He's not going to interfere with Tesla's growth. He will be back there returning punts and kicks. I believe I saw he had 99 kick returns and I want to say 75 punt returns. If not, those might be reversed, but it was 99 and 75. So plenty of experience returning kicks. Um, Prior to this signing, I think the guy that we would probably lean on the way the roster was constructed is probably Sailors or Kennedy, which I mean, they're still obviously open competition. Um, and I like Sailors a lot, but I wasn't super fond of him as a return man. He left something to be desired, but I mean, it was, I believe, his first season returning kicks. And Kennedy actually looked really good, but it was just a small sample size, so we'll see what happens with that. And then the one thing I will say that I disagree with you on, and maybe it comes out of a place of, I will say, ignorance, because I did not watch film on Verdum, but statistically speaking, looking at the numbers, um, Muhammad in 110 career games played has 26 sacks. I know he had 11 last year, but those are the numbers. Verdum in 86 games has 30 sacks. So on 30 less games, he has more sacks in terms of totality for his career. I
Who's
know
that?
he DJ Wunum,
Oh, I thought you said Verdum. I was like, wait, who's Verdum? No, yeah, DJ Wanham.
Wanham. Sorry, I thought it was a harder W. Wanham. My
Yeah,
bad. Just mispronounced the
all
name.
good, all good. I was
One of the
just confused
one
there
of the
for a
many
second,
DJs. Once we get DJ
but
Chark
true,
back here, we can really go off.
right?
But But yeah, he has in less career games played more career sacks than Muhammad. So like, don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting him to have 11 sacks as you mentioned. I do expect us to still address defensive end very early in the draft, rounds 1 or 2, depending on how the board falls. But I think we are already, in my opinion, a better team than we were last year, and we haven't even had the draft yet.
Yeah, I mean, I would not necessarily go that far simply because we still have a gaping hole at left tackle. And I know, we've talked about Larry Borum as a possible, spot starter or whatever you want to say, bridge tackle. But I don't love that as a Super Bowl contending team, if I'm being honest with you. Like, I like Larry a lot, but he's definitely depth. So I do agree we have improved in a lot of ways. There are still a few ways that I think we need to improve, which is still depth for the most part. On top of that, left tackle spot. The only thing I will say when it comes to the Muhammad Wanham discussion is I don't necessarily think Al Qadim Muhammad, his entire career, was necessarily better than Wanham, but I also take into account that Muhammad has not played necessarily as often, I will say, as Wanham did, because if you look at just their totality of their careers, like I would like to look back at those snaps and what down it was, what distance it was, and things like that, because that does factor into the or sack numbers. So also with that being said, I think last year obviously inflates Muhammad quite a bit for everybody. So that's more based off of that one season than really his entire career totality. Um,
Absolutely. And real quick, I wanted to jump in and just say we absolutely need a tackle. I still, in my opinion, I think, depending on how the board falls, I think D end and tackle are our first two picks. So
yeah,
whether
I'd
that's
agree.
first, second, first, whichever order you want. Um, so like in my head, I'm assuming with that being the blueprint, because obviously it hasn't happened yet, that we would be better off. But yes, if we had a game today, obviously there is a gaping hole, as you mentioned, at tackle. Although, I mean, until he signs elsewhere, I know you've given up on any Taylor Decker reunion, and I understand that it kind of doesn't make sense because he's already turned down, I hate to say demotion, but a less pay. But I wonder if after he hits the market, talks around with other teams, if no one's willing to give him what he wants, obviously he could just retire. But if he did want to play that one more year, I mean, maybe he would be willing to come back at a cheaper rate. But I mean, I wouldn't have my hopes high on it. I would say it's probably only a 5 to 10% chance, but I haven't completely shut the door on that.
I have slammed it and locked it and screwed it shut, simply because, like, look, if he was willing to take a pay cut, he would have. And I feel like, a lot of it comes into the fact that he hasn't signed yet. So everybody assumes, he's not going to get signed, or if he does, it's going to be the vet minimum. Do I think he's going to get $20 million? Not necessarily, but remember, he just got 15 million, or I'm sorry, 5 million from the Lions for not playing here. So he can also take 10 or 15 million because who knows what the draft's going to fall like. And I'm sure he's going to wait to sign until, around OTAs anyway, so he can kind of skip some of the off-season, workouts and things, being veteran with, injury issues. Also, I mean, I do agree. I think he definitely, overshot his landing on this one and kind of looked at it like, well, I need to make more money, not less money. And the Lions were like, dude, you probably aren't even going to play every game next year. Like, we got to be realistic here. And I think that's kind of how other teams are looking at it too. So I do wonder what his agent and him are thinking right now. But also, I do think he wants to go somewhere warm weather because, he lives in Arizona in the off season, and really seems to like it down there. So, potentially he just goes to Arizona. We could see a plethora of other, warm weather teams as well. So, but before we move on completely from DJ Wanham, I did want to add that, I do like this signing mostly because he's kind of exactly what the Lions look for opposite Hutch. And I don't necessarily want him to be the answer, but he's the style player that they really like. He might not have a ton of pass rush juice, but he's a high motor, high energy type of guy. He pushes the pocket with power, which is, what Brad Holmes kind of mentioned with Marcus Davenport that he really likes as a pass rusher, specifically opposite Hutch, because the way Hutch gets home, you're kind of forcing the quarterback towards him when you push that pocket that way instead of just getting off the block kind of situation, which, either way, you're really pushing the quarterback, but that's how they like to do it. And that also helps with like run fits and things like that. But my biggest thing is he is a high IQ player. Like watching his film, dude, there was times where like he has, let me say it this way. He has high IQ and really good feel for the game because there's times where they're running outside zone. And as soon as that offensive lineman makes his first step and gets his hands on DJ, he knows where the play is going and undercuts him because he's like, oh, outside zone. I know how this feels. And, certain things like that. When he knows he's unblocked, he knows either it's a read option or somebody's pulling to come kick him out. So he understands. Or like wide zone, which is a big play in the NFL, the backside D end is always unblocked. So he knows when I'm unblocked, I'm going upfield that way. As soon as that quarterback turns his back to me, I'm going upfield because they're handing this ball off on wide zone, and I'm going to go try to make that tackle. So I really like it for that reason. Also, he's very versatile. He's 6'5", 270 pounds, but he can drop back in coverage as well, which I really am a fan of. So gives us a lot of things to work with, and I know Kelvin Shepard's really happy getting a guy like this that he can kind of use all over the place. And like I said, I don't think he's going to be a six, I don't think he's going to be an 8 sack guy necessarily. I could maybe see 5 or 6, depending on how many snaps he plays on passing downs. But he's one of those guys that really adds to what the Lions have, but they still need more. Like you talked about before, first, I would say second round. And honestly, with how things are kind of heating up right now, I wouldn't be surprised if Jayshon Barham from Michigan is our pick because he's kind of an edge linebacker hybrid, which is exactly what the Lions need and are looking for. So,
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, with it kind of, excuse me, reminds me of, oh shoot, I just spaced on the guy that we got from Miami, the tackle,
Larry Borum.
Larry Borum. I feel like he's kind of, I don't want to say in the same quality because they're obviously totally different, but in terms of softening the blow, where if we don't get that edge rusher in round one, we at least have someone that's at least capable, at least in my opinion, at a minimum average in if we do go like offensive tackle or vice versa. If we go defensive end in the first round, then with Bourne, then we can at least mitigate that if there's a tackle that doesn't fall. But obviously, as you mentioned, an upgrade at both positions is still, I'll say welcomed, but I would also say somewhat mitigated in terms of how desperately we need one.
Yeah, I think they're, perfect stopgaps,
Yep,
essentially, kind of what you were saying there. And
the word I
also,
was looking for.
yeah, right. And I also believe the Lions are kind of redoing what Brad Holmes has done in the free agency before. Last year it kind of felt like they spent a little bit more than normal. DJ Reed is our biggest free agent with Brad Holmes. And then our second biggest was a guy who played with us the year before, Romeo Aquara. So it's like, not he's not really a guy who spends big in free agency. He likes to go out and bargain bin shop, and I know a lot of people use that in a negative way, but I think that's what you should do in free agency. Unless you have like the Raiders had a obvious glaring hole at center, they go get the big fish Tyler Linderbaum. You know what? The Lions would have done it too if they had the money. I'll tell you that right now. If they could go get Ragnow back, they would pay him. It's not because they didn't want to, it's just because they can't. And you know, Cade Mace is a great player, but we can all agree he's not Tyler Linderbaum. So they had to opt for the cheaper option, which is going to be a good fit for us. And I don't think it's going to be like, you know, a huge difference maker in terms of how much worse he is than Linderbaum for our offensive line. But I know we all would have preferred Linderbaum. But with that being said, moving on to a couple more Lions signings before we move on to our next segment. The Lions also signed Roger McCreary to a 1 year, $1.4 million deal with $1 million guaranteed, which I love this signing. I know the last few weeks on the show I've mentioned his name. I think he's going to start. I know I've said on Twitter a couple times I think he may push to start. Honestly, I think McCreary is going to start. I think right now he is better than Terrion Arnold. And that might sound crazy, okay? I know that might sound crazy, but I think right now he is better. And I'm not going to say it's like some drastic difference. Like Terrion could very well get better this offseason and you know beat him out and win that starting job. But his inconsistencies just kind of you know kill us at times on the defensive end. And then we also signed another defensive back, Christian Izien, the former Tampa Bay Buccaneer, for a 1 year, $2 million deal. Now, I think Izien may start as well, but it'll probably be at the nickel. You know, I do think, which is funny because think about it, McCreary got less money, but Izien is probably, I would say, our Brian Branch quote unquote replacement for right now. And that doesn't mean he's going to be as good by any means, but he can play the position at a pretty decent level. And, you know, kind of like McCreary, it's a little bit more consistent. So we also obviously signed Damon Clark, the linebacker, which is another guy that I've, you know, talked about a handful of times on this show. Very, very athletic linebacker, LSU. He's a guy, you know, only 25 years old that I really like for the Lions because, you know, we went and signed Rodrigo, which I love, but he's more of like an in the box, you know, run stopper. And I think Damon Clark obviously is not a great cover guy necessarily, but I think he's a little bit better than Rodrigo, and he offers different things athletically and stylistically than Rodrigo. So it's kind of a perfect pairing there. And I think he could, you know, play a decent amount for us, honestly.
I hope he does. He was a guy when he was in when it was his draft class, which I believe was 4 years ago. He was a guy I was pounding the table for. There seems to always be that guy, and he seems what I'm about to describe is a perfect Brett Holmes guy. There always seems to be a guy that has like elite talent or traits, and unfortunately, due to an injury, he just falls. His senior year or junior year, the year before he came out, he had spinal fusion surgery. And I know prior to that draft, as much as we cover the draft, granted we weren't a thing back then, uh, he was, if healthy, considered like a top 15 to 20 overall player in the draft. And I just looked up today, he went 176 because of the surgery. And I remember people were doubting or potentially doubting if he ever took a snap again, because obviously that, you know, kind of surgery and procedure is no joke. But that late in the draft, I was pounding the table, hoping that we would take a chance at him because if he is good to go and he can somewhat produce what like he did at LSU, that would have been a steal. Now, I will admit, I have not been exactly following his NFL career, so I can't tell you what he's really been doing or if he looks as great as he was in college. But just in terms of name recognition and whatnot, this kind of reminds me of Zach Cunningham from last year, because Zach Cunningham was kind of a guy I wanted the Lions to draft as well. So, what in terms of is he going to be the answer or is he going to be um, a game changer? I can't sit here and say he will be, but I do really like the signing. I'm glad I can finally see him in a Lions uniform, and once again, kind of just like the guys we just talked about last segment, he kind of mitigates the desperate need at linebacker, and we still need one, just like we still need an edge and we still need a tackle. But at least we have someone there for if something were to happen. It's more quality depth than I would say Lions fans are probably used to having.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree on all points there. And I think Clark in his NFL days obviously has not been nearly as good, at least on film, as he was in college. But obviously that spinal fusion surgery has a lot to do with that. However, he's still been pretty solid. He's a solid like sideline to sideline style of linebacker. I don't know if you're necessarily gonna like put him in there on like a heavy set to stop the run necessarily. Not that he's a bad run stopper, but I just think he's more of a horizontal style of linebacker. With that being said, though, moving on to the Lions free agent wants. Um, excuse me. We Let's take a look at position by position here. Um, Edge, obviously, we talked about DJ Wanham a little bit, and I still want us to draft one. But think about it this way, guys: we went into the OTAs last year with 8 edge rushers on our roster, and we still only have 4, I believe, at this point. Maybe even 3, because I think all we have is Wanham, Hassanine. No, we have Lacey as well. I guess we can technically call him an edge rusher. So we do have 4 right now. But I like the idea of adding another veteran guy who can kind of, sit in that rotation with Wanham because then we're not as pressed to draft one higher than we want to. And I'm not saying we shouldn't draft one in the second round, but don't get me wrong, man. If there's a better player at another position of need in the second round than edge, I wouldn't be upset if the Lions opt to go elsewhere. Now, with that being said, I don't think these signings would mitigate the need completely. I like Cam Jordan, Jadeveon Clowney, and Joe Tryon Shoyinka. Obviously, Cam Jordan and Jadeveon Clowney are past their primes, but I do think they would offer some juice alongside Hutch in a rotation. And then Joe Tryon is, a younger guy who's more of a pass rusher type, and I think he would kind of be a perfect, half and half kind of guy with Wanham. And then you get a rookie in the second round, and you can just kind of place him in that rotation. So those are the kind of edge guys that I like. And then along the interior, I like Greg Gaines and Jay Tufele. Because we just kind of need some beef, I think, in the middle. Like we have Levi Onwuzurike and Ali McNeil to be our like speed guys, and I just feel like outside of Tyreek Williams, we don't have many big dudes that just stop the run, which we lost with DJ Reader. So this would kind of be like a rotational run stopper, interior D line guy.
Yeah, in terms of the D line, I agree that we still need to add. As you mentioned, I still like Cam Jordan. I know he's kind of the um, anti Brad Holmes guy that because we are definitely, as you mentioned, seeing like a youth movement. We've only had the one guy older than 28, and Cam Jordan is, I'll just say older than 28. And but he's durable. He has not missed a game in the last 4 years. He is a veteran presence. I feel like he would be not only a contributor on the field, but also an on the field coach. I feel like he could teach, especially someone like Hassanine, so much about the game. And in addition to just being a quality defensive end, obviously his best days are behind him, but he just had, in terms of sacks and tackles for loss, his best year last year in 4 years. So he's not having career numbers, of course, at this age, but he's been better than the last 3 years. So I mean, he's not continuing a downward spiral. And then a terrible segue. I didn't mean to, but it is what it is. A kind of downward spiral kind of guy that I would be willing to take a flyer on is Joey Bosa. I wouldn't give him huge numbers because I do think any Bosa comes with name recognition, and um, I think that would, at least in perception, lead to higher money. I would give him, um, I'd say respectable, but obviously, I don't want to say damaged goods, but that's the only thought process I can get right now. But like a 1 year, 10 million kind of thing, kind of like the first original Davenport contract before we re-signed him for only like 1.5 or whatever it was. But I think he can be a rotational pass rusher at this point in time, especially since we just got, as you mentioned, someone that's a little bit better in the run game. So I feel like maybe this can complement each other. Um, but I don't have too many interior guys, if any, on my list right now with who's available. So you're alone in that class. I don't see too many difference makers or whatnot. So um, in terms of what's available in free agency, like that's that. But I would not be completely shocked if we address that in the draft, maybe in the second, like you said, depending on how the board falls, we can beef up our interior D line with losing Reed and I'm sorry, Reader, um, and have a little bit more beef.
Yeah, and with that being said, to your Joey Bosa point, the Lions have at least $13 million in cap space right now, and I only know that, and I only know it's at least 13 because a reporter tweeted out the top 10 or bottom 10, I should say, in cap space, and number 10 was a little over 13, and the Lions weren't on the list, so we at least know they have at least 13 million, which gives them a little bit of wiggle room. When we're talking about adding guys like a Joey Bosa, obviously he's going to get a little bit more money, which I don't know if we can afford him, but I'm not sure what his asking price is. Nor does really anybody else other than his agent, I guess, at this point. With that being said, though, linebacker, I did initially have Damon Clark and Logan Wilson on this list, but obviously we signed Clark, so that's nice. And then Logan Wilson retired. So two guys fell off the list for two completely different reasons. But with that being said, I did have two other guys on this list that really resemble them, which, the first one, Akeem Davis Gaither, obviously probably don't need him anymore with the addition of Clark. But you kind of get what I was looking for. We need another super athletic linebacker that can just kind of fly around and cover guys and hit people. But we also need another like veteran, smart cover guy like a Matt Milano or a Logan Wilson like I was talking about before. Matt Milano might be one of my top targets at this point because I think right now if we got Matt Milano, he's our second best linebacker other than to Jack Campbell. I think Derek Barnes, it's like this, it could go either way next season, but I think that would be a more than starter level player for us. And he would start at the will position and our linebacker core would be pretty much set. Like I know I've talked about on the show maybe grabbing a linebacker in the second or trading up to the third round to get one. But if we did this, I don't know if we have to do that. I still think we need to draft one because a lot of these guys are on 1 year deals and things. But this would really kind of shore up our linebacker room.
It would, without a doubt. The only reason he's not on my list is that personally I think he would be too expensive. I don't know, as you mentioned, I don't know what he's asking for, but he would, in my opinion, completely eliminate the need for drafting a linebacker at least early on. Maybe a depth guy in the fifth or sixth, kind of like a new Rodrigo, so to speak. But he would be the starter. We can take that off the need list, in my opinion, because think at this point in time, at least in terms of like true needs, I feel like we only have 3 to 4 left on this roster that I'm at least uncomfortable with. And if we get Milano, it would shrink the list because, like I said, that would take away the linebacker portion. But if he's not asking for too much, then I think it would be a no-brainer, and I feel like that would put a perfect kind of seal onto free agency, and then we'll just move on to the draft focus after that.
Yeah, for sure. And with that being said, my last few positions here I just have DB. I only have one corner because I do think adding Izzy and McCreary, we will probably also draft one a little bit later. So I think we're probably good on corner. We might add one more depth guy, and I like Darion Kendrick. I know I've talked about him on the show a little bit before, but a guy I really like, young, 25 years old, 6'1", 190, 200 pounds, and he's more of like a man cover corner, which is what we like. So I think he would fit really well here. And he's played well in the snaps that he has played. And then at safety, I like Ife Melifonwu, Ashton Davis, and Jabril Peppers. Now, Ashton Davis, I feel like is a guy that no one's really talking about right now, but he's a young guy, uber athletic. Now, I don't think he's necessarily a starter level player, but I think he would make a lot of sense here to kind of, not fill the Kirby Joseph role, but kind of play that role as a backup. And then obviously we talked about Jabril Peppers before, kind of a returner, Swiss Army knife, but I also think he could fill that, Brian Branch style role until he gets back. And then obviously Iffy is a guy that we have had here before. So I just think that's kind of a no brainer at this point to bring him back.
Absolutely. The only two D-backs I have is two you already mentioned. I think if he would come super cheap, I honestly think we could get him for 2 million, if not under. And as you mentioned, he's played here before. He's kind of come up in big spots. He had that ceiling, not winning, but game sealing interception against Minnesota to give us our first division. He's played in some big games. He's been, in my opinion, quality depth. I was a little bummed out when we let him go, but I understand, it's a business aspect. I wouldn't think too highly of him as a starter under normal conditions, but with dealing with whatever's going on with Kirby and Branch, them recovering at various states, I think he'll be a easier plug and play player than most. And then the only other guy on my list is Peppers, and I will say now with Dortch, we don't need him as much as a return man, but I think it would almost at this point be because he would be, in my opinion, a starting safety for us until Branch got back. I do think if Kirby is okay, because I've seen, I don't want to say mixed reports, but I would say cryptic social media tweets by Kirby saying that he's good to go, but of course the player says that. Um, and then with Branch coming back just in a matter of time, obviously, at least that one's not. Um, I don't want to say a career ender because obviously it's no walk in the park, but he's not the first guy ever to tear his Achilles. So we know roughly the timeline. We know roughly what to expect of him. So I feel like he would obviously fill in that starter need for now, but once everyone was healthy and back, I think he would be a quality like reserve, and he would still play special teams on the coverage unit and whatnot. But yeah, with Dortch here, I don't know if he would factor in terms of the return duties.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of free agency and roster moving and everything like that, if you want to do your own free agency, your own draft, check out sticktothemodel.com with their brand new BAGM mode. You can take over any team and build them how you see fit. Link is in the description. Use our code MFN 2026 to save at checkout. And I will say we got the premium account today, and I'm really liking it. It's a lot of fun to have unlimited chances and trades, and you can do all types of different things with the premium. So it definitely is worth it, and it's only like $3 a month. So I mean, if you got some spare change sitting in your couch, click that link in the description and use our code, and then you'll get 10% off. So you're welcome on that. We get to save you a couple dimes. But with that being said, moving on to some more player movement, but around the NFL this time. Jalen Waddle got traded to the Denver Broncos for a first, third, and a fourth round pick. The Miami Dolphins also got a fourth round pick in this deal, but it was the later pick, so they also moved down in the fourth round for this. Excuse me. Now, do I love this trade? Not necessarily for the value. Jalen Waddle's getting paid. He's 27 years old, so he's getting a little bit older, and he's entering his prime, obviously, in terms of athletes. 27 is right around that prime time of your career. The next 3 years are probably going to be the best 3 years for you. But with that being said, I don't think the value is crazy. Like, think about it, man. They gave up the 30th overall pick, a third and a fourth, and they got Waddle in a fourth, which is a guy who they turned down first round picks for at the trade deadline. So, do I think you know I think Miami won this trade just by a little bit though. Just because they kind of get off the contract and they give themselves some more picks, to start this rebuild. However, I do like it for the Broncos, especially because think about it, man. They were just in the AFC Championship game with their starting quarterback when their starting quarterback had a broken ankle. So I do feel like this is a very good move for Denver because their wide receiver core last year was really not that good. But adding Waddle to their core now makes it a pretty damn good one. And I'm not going to say they're, top 10 in the NFL or anything, but they're in that top half. I would say, Cortland Sutton, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, and now, obviously Jalen Waddle, I think adds a big, big need for the Broncos, and his outside speed and yak ability and everything like that really is going to help that offense, I think. And Sean Payton is their head coach, so he's gonna use him because he's known to have an affinity for those kind of guys.
Yeah, I could be very, very wrong in this. It would not be the first time, but I don't really see what Denver's doing, to be honest with don't get me wrong, I do understand they needed help at receiver. I understand Miami's rebuilding. I understand the 30th pick is super late in the first round, but I'm just maybe I'm just not big on Waddle. I just think Miami um I don't want to say took Denver's lunch, but I personally would not give Waddle. I would want a first round pick over Waddle. So between his contract, because he's not on his rookie contract anymore, and then I had to do a deep dive into his stats. And between receptions, yards, and touchdowns over the last 3 seasons, he has never been in the top 25 in any stat for any of the seasons.
Well,
So I
remember Tyreek Hill? That was right around Tyreek Hill coming over.
Oh yeah,
So
but that, in my opinion, it's kind of like the JMO effect in terms of, um, because he never, oh, he did have 1,014, so he barely broke that 1,000 yard barrier in 2023, but he is facing number twos because of Tariq Hill, and I know he wasn't the focal point of the offense, but he's not going up against double coverages. He's not going up against the top corner of any team. And he still wasn't producing, in my opinion, top stats. I'm not saying he's a terrible receiver by any means. I just don't think he was worth a four, or I'm sorry, a first plus, because as you mentioned, it was a first, third, and fourth. I want to say. I
yeah.
just think that's overpaying for a receiver of his talent. But like I said, I could be wrong. He could just go out and be a star. I did not think uh, Pickens would have a good year in Dallas as the number two receiver over there, and he made me eat my words because he was fantastic last year. So maybe this is another one of those situations, but here and today, I would just much rather have the pick if I was, well, either team.
Yeah, and I hear you there. I just feel like this is a weak draft class. Especially around that pick 30. You're not like the Broncos aren't necessarily going to get a great player that's going to fit what they need right now. But I do get what you're saying, because it is a lot. So with that being said, though, moving on to another Miami Dolphins player that might be on the trade block, Devon Achane. Achane. I always forget how to pronounce that because I know it's not how you'll see it. So, also speaking of that, Trevor Etienne apparently pronounces his name Achane. So, just so everybody knows, I don't, yeah, crazy, but hey, that's how he pronounces it, and we've been pronouncing it wrong for his entire career. So,
Even college career.
I know it's he literally said he was like people just kept saying it that way, so I just let him. So I guess being in New Orleans, he feels like people might be more apt to be able to pronounce it correctly. But with that being said, there is some rumors, some smoke that Achan might be traded, which I could see at this point. He's on a contract year, and I feel like there's a few teams around the league that might be able to trade for him, but Seattle is really the one that makes the most sense to me personally. They just got rid of Ken Walker, their Super Bowl MVP, and they didn't really, replace him. I will say, they did a decent job of adding some depth at the position, but we'll see how the draft goes down. But I could see them trading pick 32 straight up for Achan, because I think that is a solid deal. And that's not too much to give up for a guy of his caliber, because, it's kind of the opposite of Waddle in terms of stats. The dude has been awesome for the
Yep.
last few years. So I think it just makes a lot of sense for both if they end up wanting to do that.
That would be that would be something that would happen to me with my luck in the universe. I just had a long spirited debate last night about how I don't think he's worth a first round pick in a trade. And I'm like, so pick 32. I'm like, that would be, yeah. I can at least say I guess he was. Nothing wrong with the player. Like he's a fantastic player. He's a top 10 running back with ease. Probably closer to 5 than even 10. But he's about to come off his rookie contract. He's about to get a huge payday. He Running backs, as everyone knows in this league, don't typically have a long career. So it does make sense to Seattle at least. I will say that with them losing Walker. So that part I can see in terms of fit and whatnot. But man, that would just be like the feather in my cap of debates in terms of what I was just talking to someone about. And but yeah, I just don't feel like too many running backs in the league in terms of talent and longevity would be just worth a first round pick because unfortunately, as we've seen throughout time, running backs tend to have shorter careers. And while you can't find someone, at least I don't believe, obviously hindsight's 2020. I don't think there's someone you can get with that pick as good as he is at running back in this draft. So, I mean, if you want to take a running back, he would be better, already proven at the NFL level. Um, but I don't know. That's in my opinion, still a lot to give up for a running back who is about to get paid.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely hear you there. I personally just feel like he's only 24, so even if he only lasts, 4 more years and he's 28 years old, you basically just got a rookie who left after his rookie deal. So, I mean, you do have to pay him a little bit more, but think about, I don't know exactly what pick 32 gets per year, but I'd assume it's not that much off of what Devon Achan's going to get. So, with that being said, though, to wrap up this segment, we have some more player movement, but specifically quarterbacks. Justin Fields got traded to the Kansas City Chiefs for a sixth round pick. And this personally kind of signals to me a couple things. They like Justin Fields, the prospect. He's still young. They like what he can do as a backup. He, obviously adds a new, flavor to the offense with his rushing. But I also think this signals to me that Patrick Mahomes is not going to be ready at the beginning of the year. And I also think it means he's going to be probably out for a few weeks because you go trade for a guy like Justin Fields, not because you just need a backup quarterback, okay? Because he's due, $10 million, which obviously the Jets, ate most of that in the trade. But if you think about it, you could have went and signed someone for that 3 or 4 million or whatever they're going to pay him this year and not given up a pick. They wouldn't be as good as Justin Fields, but you could have done that. And I feel like this tells me they needed a guy that could actually start and play pretty well for them. And I know Andy Reid obviously, believes in his scheme ability. So I wouldn't be that surprised if Justin Fields starts the first 6 games for the Kansas City Chiefs, to be honest with you. Not to say that, Mahomes isn't going to be ready, but if I'm them, I'm not rushing him back by any means. Considering especially if Fields is able to get a couple wins for us. And then another trade, we have Andy Dalton, going over to the Eagles for a seventh round pick. This is just a straight up backup. They just needed a guy that they felt comfortable with if Hurts went down because he runs the ball so much. I mean, I think that just makes a lot of sense. And honestly, I really like this for the Eagles. So,
Yeah, Philly has a habit of having um I want to say annoyingly good depth. Like I'm not a big Dalton fan, but for only a seventh round pick, you get a proven NFL vet. He knows what the hell he's doing. And as you mentioned, with Hurts, not only running but with countless tush pushes and running quarterbacks in general just have so much wear and tear on them. See Vic or Cam Newton or I mean any countless example. They will look great one year and then instead of in my opinion, like a pocket quarterback's slow decline over 2, 3, 4 seasons. I feel like it could be just year to year with a running quarterback, and I don't think Hurts is there yet, but you never really know. But worst case scenario, you use a seventh round pick, so I mean, literally the least amount of resource you can give away in a trade, and you get a guy who at least has NFL experience, and he's not going to um, fold under the pressure of the league like if you just threw in a random young guy there. And then in terms of Fields to Kansas City, I like it a lot more than most, I think, just because I think he will pair well with Kenneth Walker in the backfield. I feel like you can do a lot of um, run pass RPOs, um, and you can do a lot of things with his legs there that you kind of couldn't do with Mahomes anyway. And don't get me wrong, Mahomes, it's not like he's a statue or anything, but he's not Fields. He doesn't have Fields' athletic ability. And I saw some fans from KC even say online that potentially, depending on how Mahomes heals, it might even be like a redshirt year and just kind of punt the year away. I saw mixed reports saying that he might not be back until like week 10 or 11. So, depending on how their record is at that point, let's say, if they had another year like last year, they might just let him kind of, I don't want to say redshirt because it's not his first year, but kind of just sit the season out and just let Fields do his thing. Or if Fields keeps him afloat for long enough, if I don't know, let's just say they're 8-3 in Week 11 when Mahomes potentially comes back. It's like, do you make that switch or do you let Mahomes fully get healthy? And but I feel like there can be quite a bit of storyline there. But as I started this mini rant with, I really like the pairing of him and Walker in that same backfield.
Yeah, I totally agree. And speaking of mobile quarterbacks, Kyler Murray made his way over to Minnesota, and he is now a Viking on a 1 year vet minimum deal. I don't love this as a Lions fan. I think he's going to do pretty well there. I was hoping he was going to go to the Colts this whole time. Honestly, I I think the Vikings are going to take a small step back in terms of defense specifically, but I also think that they're going to do a pretty good job in this draft and probably surprise some people next year, kind of like how they did last year. And I think Kyler Murray kind of adds to that because I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he's terrible. Honestly, like I have not given up on him or Anthony Richardson, which we'll talk about next. Um, but I just feel like Kyler, is going to cause us some issues as a Minnesota Viking. And, us Detroit Lions fans know we hate mobile quarterbacks because we have not seemed to stop them. Other than
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson last year, I guess. That did happen that one time.
Yeah, other than like maybe the best mobile quarterback in the league, we can't stop
Or
him.
ever. He's probably the best ever of all time. We stopped
There's
him, but
absolutely a debate to that. Like
we can't stop Aaron Rodgers from getting rushing touchdowns, apparently.
but yeah, Kyler, it's just or Kyler. Um, but yeah, if it was Lamar Jackson, yeah, we can stop him, no problem. But the other guys, no. Um,
They're
although we
not
didn't
good
stop
enough.
them 2 or 3 years ago or whatever that was.
Hmm.
Oh,
True.
flashback, sorry. Um, I I don't want to say I've given up on him, but I am not worried about Kyler going to Minnesota. It would have scared me a lot more last year if this happened than this year. Not only did he lose his starting job to Jacoby Brissett, no offense to Jacoby Brissett, but he's not the type of guy that would, in my opinion, dethrone a franchise quarterback. The fact that it happened to me says Kyler has lost a step or two. In addition to that, we have obviously Arizona's former OC who knows everything there is to know about Kyler Murray. I'm sure he can try to inform our defense exactly what needs to happen to minimize his effect. And he's obviously uber talented and former number one overall pick. It shouldn't take much. I say this, but I hate to slam JJ McCarthy as I like him as a Michigan fan, but it shouldn't take too much to make that offense work between Aaron Jones and Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson and Addison. But it didn't work last year, and getting I don't want to be just too in my Lions homerism, but getting another team's backup doesn't scare me. And as you mentioned, we do have a history of not being good against running quarterbacks. So that is the only part that even gives me a little concern. Um, but unless he can tap into a gear that he did not have, or unless there's not a Call of Duty release this year, I'm not going to be too worried about him.
Which I don't know if there is on that front of the Call of Duty. But with that being said, obviously we feel a little bit differently about this, but we'll see. I just think Kyler needs a new offensive, scheme. And I feel like he just needed, a guy who's more of a quarterback whisperer type, like Kevin O'Connell is. But we'll see how it goes. But with that being said, Anthony Richardson is the last quarterback we will talk about here. Obviously, there's been some rumors about him possibly being traded, and the Lions, surprisingly, have been a team that have been linked to him quite a bit. And I think it makes a ton of sense. The Lions and the Rams are kind of the team that I hear the most on him, which I think the Rams makes the most sense because, Stafford's probably going to retire after the season. And he gives you, a really young, uber athletic guy that I think Sean McVay could get quite a bit out of. So I'm a big fan of Anthony Richardson personally. So I would love sending like a 6th round pick over for him because that shores up our backup. And I know we got Teddy Bridgewater, but I think him, Jared Goff, Teddy Bridgewater, Anthony Richardson is a pretty damn good quarterback room if Goff were to get hurt. And I feel like I would like Anthony Richardson over Bridgewater as a player right now. So, you know, as long as it's not too much, but I do think the Rams make the most sense for him.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about at least the Lions being linked to him. I heard, him getting shopped around and permission to seek a trade and all that. And I have mixed feelings on both of that because my B team is the Rams. I'm not big on Anthony Richardson. I wasn't too big on him when he was in the draft class, and I agree he is absolutely uber talented. He can throw the ball 80 yards. He can run super fast. But I feel like he's a better athlete than football player. I don't think he's been able to put it all together. But I will say, with him, because he does have the tools, he does. That part's undeniable. And maybe with the Rams under McVay and learning under Stafford can unlock a new gear for him. Um, or, as you mentioned, if we can bring him in here, I heard countless things about Teddy Bridgewater in terms of helping out teammates. I know JMO gave him a ton of credit with him as a receiver, staying late doing routes, and then even just he said hanging out and just kind of preaching to him about what it's like just to be a professional football player. I know JMO said Teddy Bridgewater had a huge impact on his life and just maturity too. So maybe with that kind of mentorship, obviously with Jared Goff being our starter, he wouldn't have that pressure here. And so I'm like, I guess I could see it, but if it's a trade, then we acquire his contract, and even though he's on his rookie contract, he was what, fifth pick, sixth pick, something like that?
Fourth.
Fourth? Okay, so he was a top five pick, so he's going to be a very expensive third quarterback, or even a very expensive backup quarterback. Um, so I wouldn't love it, but I'm not going to lie, just because he does provide that running a capability that Goff beyond lacks. No offense to Goff, I love him, but that's obviously not his game. Um, it would be, I guess, nice to see just as a change of pace, but um, unless it comes cheap, like a 7th round pick, kind of like the Dalton deal or something like that, I would prefer if we just avoid that one.
Yeah, and I do think the Colts would eat most of that contract, as far as I'm aware. But I'm not exactly sure on that, so don't quote me on it. But I do think they would have to take most of that because he is still on his rookie deal. And a lot of that is, signing bonus and things like that. But with that
That
being
helps.
said, yeah, if, speaking of, player movement, new signings, trades, and things like that, if you're looking for some new gear, check out Fanatics. Link is in the description. It's a pretty solid place to get some gear. I know there's been a lot of negative things going around social media lately about them, but I would just recommend you don't buy NFL jerseys if you don't if you don't like Fanatics NFL jerseys. Go get them straight from the NFL store. But I do think their NBA jerseys, their shirts, a lot of their other team apparel is very good. So and it's also always on sale. So check it out. Like I said, link is in the description. With that being said, speaking of some more player movement and signings, I wanted to talk about a few underrated signings. And we're not going to go too much in depth. It's pretty much just going on a list. So in my opinion, there has been a lot of underrated signings, which you'll see because I do have kind of a long list. But to start it off, Wyatt Teller going to Houston for $8 million a year, I think was a really good deal for them. They really needed to bolster that offensive line, and it's a 2 year deal, so he's probably not going to stick around very much longer than that. But they can have some insurance there. And then I also really liked Chig Okonkwo going to Washington for just over $7 million a year. He's kind of the perfect tight end, I think, for that offense. And Jaden Daniels, could use another receiver option. And then Jalen Thompson going to Dallas, the safety. I know the number's going to sound like a lot for 11 million per year. I do think that's a pretty good signing for them because they desperately need safety help. And I just think Jalen Thompson is a very underrated player. Period. Just been a big fan of his in his time in Arizona. And then this is going to sound kind of crazy when I say this, but when I tell you why, it'll make a little bit more sense. Kenneth Walker at $14.3 million was quite an underrated signing because he wasn't even the highest paid running back in this free agency class. Travis Etienne, sorry. Let me try that again. So yeah, it's going to take me a while to get that down, but
Oh yeah.
either way, he got paid more than Kenneth Walker did, and they're the same age, and Kenneth Walker was just the Super Bowl MVP. So I just thought that was kind of crazy when I saw that. But also, I think Kenneth Walker is really going to kind of transform the Chiefs' offense. Like, I think, ever since they traded Tyreek Hill, they wanted to be more of like a methodical, slowly down the field offense to kind of give their defense a little bit more of a break, but also kind of ride their defense a little bit more. By giving them that break, they give themselves the ability to lean on their defense a little bit more. And I think this really helps with that run game, especially considering we talked about Mahomes might be injured for the first couple weeks there. So that helps out with whoever, obviously Fields will be their starter. So the next one I really like is Jalen Nailor to the Raiders. I do think Nailor is a very underrated player. I know he signed for 11.5 million per year, but I think next year we're going to be talking about that as a bargain because I think as a Lions fan, Nailor has killed us when we played the Vikings. And I know Justin Jefferson always has a good game, but Nailor has always been the guy that just quietly just gets a couple big catches down the stretch and seals the deal for him. So I think this is going to be big for Mendoza. And I mean, right now he's probably his wide receiver one. So we'll see, what else they do there. And then I also have Tyler Biadasz to the Chargers, $10 million a year. I just think this was a really good signing. And because of the fact that he was cut, he doesn't factor into their, compensatory picks. So very good signing as a player, but also smart signing on that front. And then I've talked about Leo Chenal quite a bit, so I won't have too much to say there. But for $8 million to Washington, I think that was a great signing. And then another tight end, Daniel Bellinger. This is a guy I love for the Lions. We've talked about a couple times on here, but $8 million is not that much per year for him. And I think he's really going to come on over there in Tennessee because he's a really good blocker. He's a really good receiver, and those guys tend to be tight end ones. But he just never really got his shot over there in New York. And then last but not least, another linebacker that I've talked about quite a bit on this show, Devin Lloyd to the Carolina Panthers for $14 million a year is one of the biggest bargains, I think, throughout the entire free agent process. Just because he was the number one linebacker, I think, in everybody's mind. And he got paid decently, not even like top linebacker money. So I think they really got the job done there. And he's relatively young still at just 26, I believe, or 27.
Yeah, Lloyd was someone I had high on my list, but I kind of knew it was a long shot just with contractual needs in terms of what the Lions could give him. My list is not too far different, but I only have three names in terms of what I would deem underrated. Oddly enough, we agree on Kenneth Walker, as I mentioned kind of in the last segment in more detail. With Mahomes being hurt, um, like I said, varying degrees, but he needs the whole team needs some kind of I don't want to say fix because you don't just replace Patrick Mahomes, but you can get a running back. obviously you can lean on the run game, lean on their defense, as you said. Now with Fields added, I like the signing even more because then I feel like you can add RPOs and a whole bunch of other stuff to that offense. As you mentioned, he's coming off Super Bowl MVP, and I feel like that can be a real fun offense to watch this upcoming season. For my number two underrated signing, I have Cade Mays. I think the contract, only getting 8.3 million, 25 million over 3 years. Personally, with the contract being factored in, I actually prefer him over Linderbaum, just for the kind of bang for your buck purposes. I know I touched on it in a prior podcast, and obviously, if money
Might have lost you, James. Well, I think we lost James, so we will go ahead and continue on with the show. With that being said, now next up we will talk about the available free agents or top available free agents, I should say. And I don't want to go too in depth with this necessarily.
hello?
Um, you're back. Okay, we're good.
Oh, I
So,
cut out.
oh yeah, you were cut out for that whole uh, segment there. Basically, like you talked about Cade Mays a little bit, and then it cut out. So,
Oh, that
um,
was only about 30 seconds then. But
oh,
sorry,
okay,
guys.
cool.
I was
Yeah.
talking to myself then. Um,
No worries, but with that being said, though, we did move on to the next segment. Unfortunately, we're kind of tight on time here anyway, so it's probably for the best. But with that being said, I just want to go over this list real quick of the best free agents left because there is kind of quite a bit. And I know a lot of Lions fans are going to say, "Ooh, I want him. Ooh, I want him. Ooh, I want him." Guys, it's not going to happen. So I'm going to cut your legs out from under you before you even start. But with that being said, this is not in any specific order. This is just kind of the top few guys that I saw that were available. Stephon Diggs, obviously, really good wide receiver, but he's got his off the field problems right now. And he's 32 years old, just got released by the Patriots. I could see him going somewhere, for a cheap deal, like the Eagles if they go ahead and trade AJ Brown or excuse me, a good team that kind of needs help at wide receiver, but doesn't really need a number one. And then Kirk Cousins is another one. I think he's probably going to sign with the Raiders, though, because I don't think they want to start Mendoza right away, per the reports. So Kirk Cousins makes a lot of sense for that, and he can kind of mentor Mendoza. And then I also have Taylor Decker, which we talked about a little bit before, so I won't talk about this too much. We'll see what happens with him. That's really all I got at this point. And then L'Jarius Sneed was just released by the Titans. He's a guy that was great for the Chiefs and not so good with the Titans. So we'll kind of see what he ends up getting. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't sign right away either. And then, a guy you talked about earlier, Joey Bosa, is another intriguing option for a few teams. But again, question marks. I think we're going to see a trend here with these guys as we go down. They're good players, but lots of question marks. DJ Reader is another one which the Lions could possibly still bring back. We'll see. I know there was that video, where he was talking about the possibility of coming back. So it sounds like he's definitely open to it. He just wants to be wanted, basically. So we'll see what his price tag is, but depending on how cheap it is, we could see that. Debo Samuel is another good player that's available. Not really sure where he's going to end up, man. Like I thought he was going to be pretty good with the Commanders, and I was wrong. But to be fair, he didn't have his starting quarterback the whole time, and the fact that they cut him isn't a great sign. But I mean, he was getting paid a lot, so they were able to get rid of him and open up quite a bit of cap space. And then the Lions legend Kevin Zeitler is still available, and I know a lot of Lions fans have talked about him on Twitter recently, and it's just like Taylor Decker, guys. It ain't happening. Zeitler ain't coming back, and the reason I say that is we already have Tate Ratledge at right guard, and that's the only place Zeitler's going to play. So I just don't see it. It just doesn't make sense for us because then we're gonna have to move Tate for one season. You know what I mean? It just we'll be okay. I think. There's a couple other guys in free agency at guard if we need one that could play left, and then to kind of wrap it up. Aaron Rodgers is another one that's available. He'll probably go back to the Steelers though if he plays next season. David
Lions as a
Njoku.
backup.
I mean, anyway, I wouldn't. I wouldn't hate it, but I know a lot of people who would.
What a look that would be. Just the physical appearance of him in a Lions uniform.
Seriously, man. And we'd have to make sure he gets number 12 just because.
We would have to start him 2 games a year, just the Green Bay games, because he would be more motivated than ever.
Right, he goes out there and puts up a better stat line than Goff the whole
Just a
year.
bye week for Goff. Just enjoy the extra rest, bud.
And then David Njoku, who actually just visited with the Ravens, which I think that would be a great fit because they do need to replace Isaiah Likely. So I think he'd be a 1-to-1 replacement basically behind Mark Andrews. And then Trayvon Diggs, we'll see what happens with him. He signed with the Packers and then kind of got released shortly after. So I'm sure his name isn't too hot right now in NFL circles. But, his name holds value at least in this portion of the free agent cycle.
Yeah, and I agree with 3/4 of your list. For me, the 4 I have that are best available, and I think 3 of the 4, granted, I know we won't get them all, of course, but I think 3 of the 4 would be great fits in Detroit. Joey Bosa, as I mentioned before, just a situational pass rusher. I don't think he's that every down guy anymore. I know he's dealt with plethora of injuries, but I still do think he has value. Joel Benito, speaking of other guards we could potentially use, especially on the left side, he is a grizzled vet. I mean, he's not going to be a part of this youth movement that we've been having this offseason, but what could potentially just be a band-aid at the left guard position, as much as I would love Zeitler back, as you mentioned, for very good reasons. We're not moving Ratledge over for just 1 year and all that. So I miss him, but we have our right guard of the future, in my opinion.
Sign him and put him at fullback.
I mean, I'm down.
I'm so serious. Like I know I laughed after, but if he's gonna do a $3 million deal, let's do it, brother. I don't care.
Oh, if we can get him for $3 million, I'd sign him even if it's just as a backup role or even like a goal line additional lineman as one of the big tight ends. Like
100%.
Deebo Samuel, he's the one on the list that I have that is not a target of mine, but I think he still provides value. I don't think he's going to be obviously what he used to be, but I still think kind of like Bosa. He's not what he used to be, but he still has value. He can still be a multi-purpose tool. I just don't think he can be the focal point of an offense anymore. But I feel like he can still be a very good complement that teams can't ignore if you do sign him. And then David Njoku, he's my dream tight end too, but after signing Conklin, I doubt we go after him, and I think he would be a little too expensive. But he has experience under Petzing, so a part of me does wish that we can somehow, some way get him. I know he likes to do 2 and even 3 tight end sets, so that's another name on the list I look out for. However, as you mentioned, with him visiting Baltimore, he is a perfect Isaiah Likely replacement. So bummer for us, but at the same time, it was very unlikely to happen anyways.
Yeah, excuse me. And I also think, excuse me. Njoku's lack of blocking kind of, I think, always probably made it not as likely, which we've said likely a lot this conversation, it seems like, but it made it not as likely that we go after him, even though he was also on my list as well. But with that being said, that is it for this show. But before we let you go, I want to let you guys know about something that's really cool coming up pretty soon. Michigan Football Network is going to branch out and we're going to start running events. I know this might sound crazy, but we're going to do like watch party events, VIP tailgate events, and things like that. If you've ever been to a VIP tailgate before like a football game, it is one of the best parts of the entire situation, in my opinion. I've been to many Lions games. I went to 2 Lions games in Lambeau. And both times I got the VIP tailgate, it was like, $60-$70 for all you can eat, all you can drink, which I will say the food was a little, hot dogs and hamburgers, but you can't complain when you're getting 12 whiskey Cokes before you go to a Lions game. So I really like, I have a lot of fun doing it, so I figured why not throw one ourselves. With that being said, though, our first event is presented by MFN because our events business will be MFN events. With that being said, our first event will be a Final Four watch party on April 4th. Tip off at 6:00 p.m. More details to be announced. So stay tuned with our, shows and our Twitter as those come out. So with that being said, though, obviously links are in the description for both Fanatics and Stick to the Model. Check them out. Both things are a very good resource for what they do. With that being said, that's going to do it for this one. As always, we appreciate you guys for watching. You can find me at JSoSweet, James at Gullet_James, and you can find both of us at MIFB Network and MichiganFootballNetwork.com. Once again, we appreciate you guys for watching, and we'll see you next week, Wednesday at 6 p.m.